got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
This is the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to TalkTainmentRadio.com. We go where you go on the world's greatest radio. You are now in touch with the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am the co-host, Mr. Bobby, and this is radio the way it should be heard. In a few moments, I'm going to give you the number that you can call the show to get in contact with the show, and also I'm going to give you the email address that you can, or Gmail, that you can Gmail me your questions, and I will try to get to them, or I'll have my staff try to vet them, and we can get it on. Chances are we will not be able to get your question on today. However, if you Gmail me, then a process is in place where your question can be answered right here on radio, the way it should be heard, TalkTainmentRadio.com. Live on the line from Washington, D.C. is Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. He is the author of the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. It is a workbook, a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, which is white supremacy. He will be speaking on that and answering your questions according to the compensatory counter-racist code. He will answer all of your questions. So when you do have a question, make sure that those questions are in those 9 areas of human activity that Mr. Fuller describes in his book. You can get the book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, by going on the website, which is producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And on the screen will come all the information that you need to get in contact if you have a problem with the people who run that shipping. The book, and also there's a word guide, and I strongly recommend that you get that too, a counter-racist word guide, which will also help you to understand the concept. And you have to stay with it, and eventually, if you do, it will come to fruition for you. Okay, with that being said, let me introduce to some and present to others Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Mr. Fuller, as we customarily do, we like to say, how are you this morning?
I am still learning.
You are still learning. We're going to have you, usually we have you start off the show with some thoughts, maybe a letter that you've received from somebody, which we will get to. But a letter was given to me, and by Brother Abu here, and he had a question that he would like for you to answer since it's ongoing. He says, "Dear Mr. Fuller, Colin Kaepernick, a quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, made a statement against racism by not standing for the national anthem of this country. The usual suspects have taken the focus off racism and placed it on dishonoring military veterans, which I know that you are, when Mr. Kaepernick clearly stated that his not standing up for it by sitting down was only against the mistreatment of black people and people of color and the injustices that follow. According to the code, Is this according to the code, this is in the fifth area of activity, law, the sixth area of activity, which is politics, and possibly in the ninth area, war, or maybe all combined. What is your opinion on what Kaepernick did? And is my observation, Mr. Fuller, correct according to the compensatory code? This is from Abu in Columbus.
Yes, starting with, he mentioned the 9 areas of activity, which are specifically in the textbook Counter-Racist Code: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. So, as far as I know, if I'm somewhat a little bit familiar with the incident that occurred, I was reading something in today's paper, morning's paper. There was a statement made by a basketball player, former basketball player, Abdul Kareem Jabbar. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And he has written an article, I think, in the Washington Post pertaining to the subject, and I was glancing at it, and I've also been looking at some television snippets of concerning the incident. I don't know all of the details, but it raises an issue that I was thinking about just at the moment that you started talking in that introduction. I had been thinking about raising that issue because I periodically think that it's important to raise the issue about that, about the flag, quote unquote, patriotism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What is it? What is the respect for the flag? What is the salute to the flag? What about the Star-Spangled Banner? And what about it? And that's a song that somebody wrote. And what are the connections with that? And what is a person's, last but not least, what is a person's duty when these things become an issue? What kind of position should you take? What is the correct position to take? What is the incorrect position to take? And why? So, some years ago, starting in the 1980s, someone called me in the middle of the night. I think it was from California. This was about 1984 or 85, when the flag issue was very important at that time. Some people may remember that. Some people may not. But that's when the issue was raised directly to me. Someone called me and asked me this specific question. Said, Fuller, you always talk about this code that you got. So what does the code say about this flag issue and about the national anthem and all this? What does the code say about that? So you got anything about that? And I said, no, I hadn't thought about it. And but now that it's been raised, it's my duty, according to compensatory counter-racist logic. Once an issue is raised, you can't turn loose to it. You have to address it one way or another. So I said, the only way I can address it now is I don't know what to say about it because I haven't thought about it that much. But I will get on it. And maybe in a couple of weeks, you can get back to me and I will try to codify it because the whole idea is in counter-racist logic, you have to codify everything. There's a best way to go about doing everything. So when someone says something to me, it is my duty, according to the compensatory counter-racist code, it's my duty to try to find an answer. I may not find it, but I've got to try to find an answer. That's a duty, try to find an answer to all questions. That should be, really, I look at it under counter-racist logic, that's everybody's duty. Everybody on the planet. Try to find the correct answer to every question that is raised. So, I said in a couple of weeks I might be able to come up with something because I haven't really thought about it. So it took me about 9 months, roughly, 8 or 9 months. And it came to me in the middle of the night. My suggestion, because these are all just suggestions under compensatory law, just suggestions, not laws, but suggestions. So I said, okay, if you're talking about pledges to the flag, because that's what it was at that time, I said, try this one on, because I'm going to put it in a forthcoming updated version of the compensatory code. So this is my response. I said, I do at all times relate to the flag. Now I want to put in parentheses, that applies to any flag, anywhere at any time, because that's when you come up with compensatory logic, that's what you try to do. Come up with the very best thing that can ever be said and never can be said better. So that was my try at that, and I still hold to it. But I'll repeat it again. I do at all times relate to the flag the exact same way that the flag relates to me. Now that's what you call the compensatory universal pledge to any flag anywhere in the world or anywhere outside the world that will ever exist at any time, and it will fit any situation at any time. Now as far as standing, when the flag, when the Star-Spangled Banner, which is about the flag, a flag anyway, is played, you raise a lot of questions here. Suppose the person has arthritis, or suppose the person is just dozing off. Is that a crime not to stand? See, we got a lot of questions to ask and answer. Or the person just feels tired. I mean, the person is not against anything or for anything, but the person is just tired. And you see the person not standing up because the music is being played. That's all we're talking about here, some music, or some sounds that people call music. But then you look at the words in the Star-Spangled Banner, which is about a flag, oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light, bombs bursting in air. Well, a person might have a problem with that. And particularly, if a person is against bombs bursting in air, they may not even like that part. So, and even if they did like it, what is standing up or sitting down got to do with it? Now you say, well, you owe that to the people who are around you. No. You only owe correct action under correct circumstances about not mistreating people. That's what it's all about. So, in the words itself about flag standing for justice and all of this type of thing. But a flag, unless it's in the form of a person, cannot stand for justice. If that flag is in the form of a piece of cloth or wood or painting on a wall, that can be a flag. Sometimes people paint on a wall something that they say is a flag. Well, that wall, nor the paint on the wall, cannot produce justice. It takes a person to produce justice. You say, well, the flag stands for justice. No, it doesn't. I mean, if it's not in the form of a person. The only thing that can stand for justice, which means balance between people, which means guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. That's what justice is. It takes a person to produce a product called justice. A emblem, quote unquote, on a wall cannot do that. So I'm saying, as far as the standing, which I think that was the issue, whether someone stood up or sat down. Well, people can stand up and sit down. That has nothing to do with mistreatment of people, unless it has something to do with mistreatment of people, or guaranteeing that a person is treated correctly. And that's the way that's handled. So that is the way that I would approach it, in that codified manner that's based on logic and truth.
Yes,
based on truth. Mm-hmm. What are we talking about here? What are we actually talking about? I mean, are we talking about some type of Mickey Mouse exercise, or what are we talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And also, I want to mention another word that comes up, patriotism. Now, I'm going to deal with that also within that same context in answer to this question, because a lot of people say, well, that was unpatriotic. Whatever it was. Well, was it? Well, let's look at what patriotism is. Patriotism means you're devoted to a cause, is to the best of my understanding. Look in any dictionary and see what it's all about. Okay? Now, if you're devoted to the cause of justice, and justice has never been produced by anybody, by the way. Justice doesn't exist, because you can't have white supremacy and justice on the same planet at the same time. It does not exist. That's something that people aspire to. But if you're going to be patriotic, if you are for justice, or trying to be for justice, because nobody's proven that they're for justice yet, because it hasn't been produced, and you are against non-justice, then that automatically makes you patriotic, particularly if you are for justice and against white supremacy, which is the greatest form of non-justice on the planet. If you're against white supremacy and for justice, or say that you are, you can't get more patriotic than that. So when people ask me, Fuller, are you patriotic? I say I know of no person more patriotic than myself. That's the codified response. That's the universal codified response. If you, in your mind, you are opposed to the system of white supremacy, and you are for the system of justice.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody gets more patriotic than that, automatically.
Yes, sir. Brother Abu had mentioned that from what he had said in trying to understand and get your opinion on that. Colin Kaepernick was accused of basically being anti-American and such that goes with that, and the usual suspects are in place to promote, to take the focus off of what Mr. Kaepernick stood for, because he stated that he was not against the military. He was not against, the soldiers had done anything. He was against that he could not stand anymore for something that was happening to black folk or people of color. And he felt that by not standing was his way of having them face the injustices that they do. What was mentioned that black soldiers would come home from fighting a war, but still weren't free at home, had to face dogs and hoses and all kind of things. And these were war veterans. And nobody hardly said anything except for people who were in the civil rights movement. And he said that it was the mistreatment of people is why he was standing. But somebody put the focus on the fact that he was disrespecting the military. Could you address that? Could you address that?
Well, I'll address this simply by what I say in this program every week, and that is all problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. So anyone who would object to my behavior, state your case by raising the questions. First of all, first question is, what crime? Where's the crime here? See, if I'm doing something, tell me what crime I have committed, because things are either criminal or they're not.
Yes, sir.
See, there's no wiggle room there.
Yes, sir.
Something is either criminal or it isn't. Something is either correct or incorrect.
Yes, sir.
All right? So walk through it step by step. What did I do that constitutes a crime, or which means mistreatment? See, when you commit a crime, you're mistreating something.
Yes, sir.
all right? Some thing, some person, some animal, some creature, the environment, or something. You're committing a crime. That's what crime is. You're mistreating, okay? Now, whom have I mistreated? That's the first order of business. Let's make the rubber meet the road here. You know, get away from all that emotional stuff and let's get right down to it. What are you talking about? What are you talking about, sir, ma'am? What are you talking about? And for what reason? What are you getting at? What are you trying to gain or not gain or get rid of, and why? See what I mean?
Yes, sir.
And that's it. And see, so this is the approach. All the people making these remarks of if they sound like they're condemning someone, you know, and the only reason to condemn someone is that they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, or they're not doing something they should be doing.
Yes, sir.
And you got to explain why.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Kaepernick addressed their complaint and told them that, no, I wasn't getting on, this is his words, to the effect, I'm not getting on the military or disrespecting them. I want to bring focus to the mistreatment of people of color in this country. And by standing up or salute, he said he could no longer, in his conscience, he consciously objected to that, standing for that flag, for the hypocritical stance that it was portraying. He couldn't do that, and it appeared that the usual suspects tried to change the focus off of injustice to they brought the military in and all that, and he did answer that. He did answer that. What crime did I commit, basically? And
that's it.
Yeah.
See, the burden of proof of something that's being done that shouldn't be done is on the person who objects to what's being done. Which means they got to explain. You make your case. Make your case.
Yes, which they haven't, because I've been looking at. This has been going on for 5 and 6 days, and it still is even today, being Wednesday. It's still a raging thing because the usual suspects will not let it go, even after Mr. Kaepernick explained that he did not disrespect the military. In fact, there have been some military pundits that said that he did not disrespect them. But anyway, Brother Abu had that question and wanted you to answer that. Talk to Him at Radio is a 24/7, no-charge, worldwide broadcasting facility that have hosts delivering on various topics such as news and lifestyle, sports, health, wellness, religion, and, of course, politics. Now, here's one that I'd like to share with you, and I believe that it will be coming up next after Mr. Fuller's show, and that is called Crossing Cultures. The host, Julia Lynn Walker, has great conversation regarding the diaspora. If you are interested in knowing your history, Julia Lynn talks about that and more with great guests. Now, you can tune in to Crossing Cultures every Wednesday, broadcasting live or broadcasting exclusively on TalkTameItRadio.com. And I would suggest, if you haven't heard the program, especially after with our show, Mr. Fuller's show, it is good because she has various guests. Anyway, the phone lines are now going to be open at 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. Make your comments brief and to the point. Make sure that they are according to the code, because that's the only way that Mr. Fuller will answer that. Let's go to the Gmails, and this is from Brother Fard. He says, Mr. Fuller, question. Isn't the 10 stops and others that Dr. Welsing added our anti-racist code that, if applied by all black people, could end racism overnight? The bottom line is to get rid of it, and anything constructive coming from non-whites that does that. Racism, white supremacy, logically speaking, I think. So since I've been applying this code to the best of my ability and have I given up a lost socially for it many years, but it has kept me out of trouble. So is my logic correct, Mr. Fuller? And thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Well, the 10 stops that I came up with, and Dr. Wilson, she thought of 7, I think.
Yes, sir.
And she put that in her book, I
Okay.
believe. I only have 10 in mind.
Okay.
And that is the ones that I designate. I say there are 10 basic stops. See, underline the word basic.
Okay.
Because the race problem is still here, and the book goes, after I put the 10 stops in there, I could have just said, well, these 10 stops, that's my suggestion for solving a race problem. But the book is much thicker than those 10 stops. Plus I have the word guide and all that. See, so what it is, it's an ongoing process until all questions and all answers have taken place in the universe, and we actually have the eradication of the system of racism. I mean, it's really gone and been replaced with a system of justice. This is the only time that you have what you call the complete code. See, the basic question here is, because someone asked me this years ago, said, Fuller, you got these writings and whatnot and all like that. I mean, and you make these talks. Say, where is the complete code? Say, is the complete code in your book? I said, there's no such thing as a complete counter-racist code until racism no longer exists. I said, these are just suggestions. My book is just a list of suggestions and observations, just like it says on the back of the book, that these are, based on experiences of mine and observations and studies, and I make suggestions based on it. I observe, and then I say, okay, I'm looking at this. Now, what's the best way to approach it in my mind? And so I make a suggestion, and I always tell people, tests, like the gentleman just said, that he's been using it, and it works for him. Well,
yes,
whatever will work in the most constructive manner for you is, by definition, a part of the counter-racist code, automatically. And that's anything, something that nobody else thought of and whatnot. You think of it. I always tell people, stand by your work. I mean, you can point out mine, but if you come up with something, you just simply say, now, this is my idea of what should be done. Anybody who's working anywhere to eradicate mistreatment of people and mishandling of things, including the environment, this is all a part of the compensatory code, because compensatory just means you're making up for what's missing. Something is missing that should be there. So if you can find out what should be there and what it should replace, if something is there that shouldn't be there, and you can replace it with something better, that automatically becomes a part of the really compensatory and counter-racist code. If it has an effect against racism, it's automatically that. I mean, even if you don't put a name on it, it's automatically that. Why? Because it works. Anything that works in a constructive manner, because racism is about doing things ultimately with a non-constructive purpose, which means mistreating people. That's what racism is. So anything that works against that is automatically a part of a compensatory code or a counter-racist code.
Yes, sir. Okay. Let's see here. TalkTameRadio.com. We go where you go, and you can check us out on WCRS-FM 98.3 Wednesdays and Sunday evenings. Blogs and podcasts are available. You can download the TalkTameRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio the way it should be heard. As we get ready to go to the station break, listen to this. Your calls, I see the phone lines are lit up. We're going to get to those next, and then, of course, your Gmail, or your Gmails, we will also read them. We will do that and more, all that on the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on TalkTameItRadio.com. All righty, phone lines are jumping, so let me do this. TalkTameItRadio.com. We go where you go, and you can download the TalkTameItRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio the way it should be heard. This is Mr. Bobby, the co-host on The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. And if you would like to get in contact with the show, as these callers are, you can do that by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at the numeral 7, MrBobby@gmail.com. Let's go to the phone lines because they're jumping. What line is up first? Line number 1. What is your question for Neely Fuller Jr. according to the compensatory code?
All right. Good morning, Mr. Fuller and Mr. Bobby. Mr. Fuller, I have a question. I read the newspaper to improve my condition and to help produce justice, but I don't read as quickly as I would like to. And I wondered, what's your experience with reading the newspapers? Do you have advice on, what's your experience? How do you read, and do you read quickly and retain information?
Oh, I'm a very slow reader myself. But, you can read as fast as you can if you can comprehend what you're reading. Then you don't consume a lot of time. Reading sometimes consumes a lot of time. It certainly consumes a lot of my time. And since I am a slow reader, it consumes quite a bit of time. I'd like to be able to speed read and comprehend what I'm reading. It's just like when someone is talking to me. I have a tendency, being from what you might call the South old school, even today, I like to comprehend quickly, what a person is saying. And I have noticed over the years, by me being up in age and whatnot, and I usually came from a place where usually people talk slowly and methodically. Over a period of time, I've lost the ability to keep up with some of the sounds that people call the new music and whatnot that's been coming up since in the last 20 years, particularly like what we call rap or hip-hop. People ask me a lot of times, sometimes they do, every now and then, about some song that a rapper has made and what I thought about it or something like that. I said, I can't make any comment on it at all. Because in the first place, without even talking about the content of what is being said, I can't keep up with it.
Yes, sir.
I don't even know what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a foreign language to me altogether. Why? Not because of the words or the content. It's because it's so fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean, it's usually accompanied by a lot of background sounds. Of course, what we call music, big bands and all like that, that was true then. But you could hear every word precisely, like I used to hear, I'll take the liberty of naming some names, like Nat King Cole. I could understand every word that he was saying because usually the background sounds, the instruments and whatnot, didn't drown out what he was saying. A lot of old school musicians didn't like for anybody, in the background to upstage, you might say, the words to the sounds that are coming out of their voices. And the words were precise. I'm just giving that as an example.
Yes, sir.
But I lost the ability. So getting back to the reading thing, I'm a slow reader, too. See, I'm slow when it comes to picking up on sounds, and I'm a slow reader. That's why even when people call in on this program, and I'm sure it annoys a lot of people, that I will say, well, can you repeat what you said? Or something like that, because
yes,
I'm used to, over a period of time, I like to kind of choose my words carefully.
Yes, sir.
And I'm very slow.
Okay. Thank you for your call, sir. Mr. Fuller, would that question that he asked, would that be considered in the second area of human activity according to the compensatory code, which would be education?
Well, all areas of activity are interconnected.
Okay, I got
See,
you.
entertainment is interconnected with education.
Because he could reach for entertainment, yes.
Yes, I mean, see, so I just say these are just words.
Yes,
like
sir.
The whole entire counter-racist code book that I have written is divided into these 9 areas, but all of these 9 areas are interconnected.
Interconnected, okay.
What happens in economics has a lot to do with what happens in religion.
Okay.
What happens in religion has a lot to do with what happens in politics.
Yes, sir.
What happens in politics has a lot to do with what happens in sex.
So they're interconnected then.
They're all interconnected.
All right.
And I'd like to say this about politics.
Yes, sir.
A lot of people think that when I talk about politics, I'm talking about election times. I mean, voting. That's what people think about. Or making speeches in what they call a political campaign.
Mm-hmm. But you say
politics is any interaction between one person and another.
Say that again, please.
Politics is any interaction between one person and another.
All righty.
And that is the minute you speak to someone, I mean, on a telephone or on a bus or whatever, or you interact in any way with another person, you are engaging in politics.
Well, then let us engage in more politics by going to line number 3. Good morning. You are on with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. What is your question according to the compensatory code?
Hello. I know Mr. Fuller last week touched on some codified things.
Could you speak up? Because we're having a difficult time hearing you. Please, sir.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I know Mr. Fuller touched on some things last week, how to remain codified at work, and I just have a question.
Okay.
I just started working at a job maybe a few months ago, and although I haven't had any problems yet, as of yet, I'm wondering what should I do about, sometimes they have company activities that are kind of like outside of work that are not necessarily required, but it's kind of like an unwritten thing that you're expected to come. And
yes, sir.
These are kind of like parties or company get-togethers or picnics or whatever. And I'm just wondering what's the codified thing to do in response to that, because I do not like to attend these, and it's almost, I think it's almost seen as bad as if you don't go, maybe it might affect your career later on down the road.
Mr. Fuller, what would be your response in a codified fashion to his question?
I've been on jobs, and just like I said, and I said at the beginning of this program, and I said on every program, if that's a problem, all problems are solved by what?
Questions
and answers. So when someone would approach me, and people did, and tell me to attend or ask me to attend a party or announce that they're going to have one, I would go into the question mode, like you do, if I thought that might be a problem.
Yes, sir.
And so I would just simply say, is this mandatory? Do I have to come? All right, and then wait for the answer. Never help a person with the answer once you ask a question, because you want their answer, not yours.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you might already have your answer, but you want to know what their answer is. That's why you ask the question. That's the codified procedure. So, if the person says, well, I mean, it shows whatever and whatnot, and we are having this party, I mean, and we're going to have it at such and such a hotel and whatnot, and you don't have to come, but, I mean, we do expect you to come. Well, then I got another question. See, it's just, you don't never limit your questions. You say, why do you expect me to come? Say, well, because whatever answer they give. See, I don't know what answer they're going to give.
Yes, sir.
All right. And so then if you have another question, you just ask it until all questions are answered.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom line question, which it seems to be implying here, if I don't come, what are going to be the direct or indirect consequences?
Yes.
Am I going to be penalized, or am I going to be applauded, or am I going to be whatever?
Yes.
Is it any way that I may be looked upon in a disparaging way if I don't attend?
But the key thing is to
either
ask.
directly or indirectly.
Yes,
I
sir.
want, and I am requesting an honest answer.
Mm-hmm.
See what I mean?
Yes,
and
sir.
if they tell you, well, you just might not be considered for any promotions and whatnot. You might not be considered a cooperative employee if you don't come to this party that we're going to have. Then you say, oh, okay. Well, I don't want to be considered that.
Yes,
so I
sir.
will attend.
Mm-hmm.
That's if you decide that you're going to. Then, but before you go, you say, now, what am I required to do once I attend?
Okay.
See what I mean?
Yes, sir.
So you don't limit your questions. You
Yes,
want to
sir.
get down to the details. There's an old cliche about, everything is about the details.
Yes, sir.
So compensatory logic is all about going into fine detail. What shall I do when I arrive?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is there anything I shouldn't do after I arrive? Is there anything I should do? Is there anything I'm expected to do? Is there anything that I better do? All right. I want to get all these things and have it and write it down.
Write it down.
and remember who told you this.
Yes,
all right.
so you
because
can
later on you might have to bring it up.
Yes,
now
sir.
this is what I was told.
Yes, sir.
By
so and so.
Yeah, by so and so last February, as a part of my job description,
Mm-hmm.
that I must do this, I must do that, or I must not do this, I must not do that, and the penalty will be blah 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 blah. See what I mean? You want to.
Yes, sir.
Information is power.
Be specific.
Be specific.
Yes, sir.
See, codification is all about getting into details.
Yes, sir.
And how do you get into details? Questions and
answers. Thank you for your call, sir. Even if the person who asked the question receives lies, it doesn't matter. You still go into your details so that you can be sure that so-and-so said whatever they said, so that you can have proof that you didn't make this up. This was said by so-and-so.
Yes.
Even if they lie.
You say if this is a job requirement, if it's a job requirement that I drink a half a fifth of vodka at that party, I want somebody to put that in writing.
Yes, sir.
All right?
Put it in writing.
Or I will be considered non-cooperative, not a team player, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, sir. TalkTameItRadio.com. We go where you go, and you can download the TalkTameItRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio, the way it should be heard. This is Mr. Bobby. I'm the co-host on the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and we've started out today's show speaking to the address that Kaepernick had. If you'd like to chime in on that, you can, or you can go off topic to any subject that you would like to have. Mr. Fuller, I've been asking, we do this every week, questions about your book. Can you speak to that, how we can get it, and any other latest information?
Go to Produce Justice, that's PRODUCE, producejustice.com. And what will come up on the screen is a brief description of a basic textbook, the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, and it has a complementary title, A Compensatory Counter-Racist Code, and it's a textbook workbook for thought, for speech, and or action for people who perceive themselves to be victims of racism, which is white supremacy, according to compensatory logic and compensatory definition.
Yes, sir.
And you can get that book by going to producejustice.com, and there's also a compensatory counter-racist word guide that's an addition to the basic book. You couldn't get it all in one.
Meaning that there is an additional
four
fee.
covers.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay, excuse me for stepping over you. Okay, yeah, because I'm asked that question all the time. But how can we get the book, and that the additional book, the compensatory counter-racist codified word guide, is also for an additional fee?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay,
right.
that's good. All righty. Let's see here. Are we going to go to the phone lines or? Okay. All righty. Had a question from, let's see, Sean in Houston. He says, Mr. Fuller, last week you said we should expect to be brutalized living in the system of racism and white supremacy. If that is to be expected based on the code, why should a non-white person comply if we should expect to be brutalized? If we should expect to die anyway, why not protect ourselves? Thank you for answering, Sean in Houston.
Well, you want to protect yourselves in the best possible manner. I sometimes use the analogy, oftentimes, of, I would say, a soldier who has dropped behind enemy lines. And if you're a victim of racism, you are behind enemy lines. Or a soldier who has already been captured. You've already been captured. You're a prisoner of war. So therefore, you do what works best for a prisoner of war. I often use movies as examples of some of the things that I'm saying, because sometimes people have seen the movies or they can't get the movie, and they can pick up on the lessons much quicker that way. I sometimes use the movie Shawshank Redemption about how the main character in that movie conducted himself once he was a prisoner. Shawshank was supposed to have been a fictional prison.
Yes, sir.
In the state of Maine, I understand, according to the movie. And this character was in the prison. So when you have to work with where you are, you can't work with where you are not. You have to always be where you are, wherever you are. So if you are a prisoner of war in a camp, a prison camp, there's certain things you have to do because you are in the camp.
Yes, sir.
You can't operate like you're outside the camp when you're in the camp. So therefore, you conform to the things that are being done there, but you do it reluctantly if you're in there and you shouldn't be there. You've been convicted for something that you didn't do. And in the case of black people, you're convicted for the crime of having the incorrect color.
Yes.
That's what the white supremacists are saying.
Yes, sir.
You're the incorrect color. You shouldn't have appeared on this planet in that type of color. What are you doing on this planet with that type of color? You're out of place. And therefore, you are due to be punished because of the color of your skin. That's what racism is. It isn't anything else. You are a person to be punished because of the color of your skin. So you're born in prison. So in answer to the question, how come you're not supposed to resist? You're supposed to resist, but you're supposed to do it with intelligence, because many of the ways that non-white people call themselves resistant is not resistant at all, but they say that they're resistant. And I give that illustration about, when you're confronted with what could be a race soldier. That's a racist in a uniform acting under what they call the color. That's a cliche saying that you hear quite frequently, the color of law. In other words, a person who is really committing criminal acts under the color of being a law enforcement officer in a constructive manner.
Yes, sir.
But a race soldier, meaning a person who is really a racist, pretending to be a law enforcement officer or a police officer, all right? So there's always that danger. So I say, as a part of the code, an intelligent reaction when you're confronted by a suspected race soldier, a suspected racist, acting or pretending to be a policeman. Don't fuss, don't fight, and don't flee. Why? Because you're not supposed to be resistant and whatnot. Like, apparently, this is what the gentleman is asking. He said, no, because it doesn't work. Compensatory logic is about doing what works. Andy Dufresne, if you look at that movie in Shawshank Redemption, he had to put up with a lot of things that he didn't want to put up with.
Yeah, he got beat on.
He got beat on. He got sodomized, all right, by other prisoners, which is what happens in a system of white supremacy. You get shot at, or you might get killed by other prisoners.
So are you saying that we are to be beat on it also then?
No, but I'm saying if it happens,
Yeah.
you may have to endure some of these things in order to get in a position where you don't have to endure it.
Oh, okay.
See what I mean?
Woo. Yes, sir.
See, you're a prisoner of war, so everything that goes with that means you have to endure it.
Okay.
See, every prisoner is thinking about, hey, I'm getting out of here. I mean, most prisoners anyway,
Yes, sir.
except those who have become institutionalized,
Yes,
have
sir.
gotten to the place where they like it, like being prisoners. But most prisoners won't. They don't want to be prisoners.
Yes, sir.
All right? So, but you have to be intelligent about how you go about doing it.
Yes, sir.
I mean, your first day in a prison, I don't think you run right up to the razor wire and say, I dare you to shoot me. All right. When they have told you don't go anywhere near that razor wire, you will get shot.
Yes.
That is not intelligent resistance. And so, therefore, if you're pulled over, don't fuss, don't fight, and don't flee.
That's a good word, intelligent resistance. I never heard that term before, but that sounds good.
Counter-racism is all about being methodical and intelligent and logical in every move that you make.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're not going to be what? Successful.
All righty. That was from Sean in Houston. By the way, I didn't mean to step on you or cut you off, and trust me, I will get letters about that. So I'm apologizing now for those who think that I may have accidentally cut Mr. Fuller off. Didn't mean to and don't want to. Woo! You guys keep me in check. Line number one? Okay. Line number one, what is your question for Neely Fuller Jr. according to the compensatory code? Go ahead.
Good morning. This is Brother Ali. Mr. Fuller, I've analyzed your work, and I appreciate your life's work. And I have a comment and a question related to your work. The comment is somewhat a little bit long, but just be patient with me. I'll go quickly.
You only have a couple of minutes, brother. Okay.
Okay. It's a couple of minutes. I'll give you a couple of minutes. Through various tactics, including violence, including economic deprivation, through deceit, theft, usurpation, peonage, which has, brought black people to the point, some to the point of starvation, some to the point of abject poverty. The system of white supremacy, racism, has created this need to survive, need to get by mentality amongst black people, which is somewhat selfish, somewhat instant gratification oriented, somewhat short-term oriented. And this need to survive, need to get by mentality has produced from the white supremacy system, from this need to survive, need to get my mentality, the white supremacy system has produced a sufficiently large pool of what I would call petty survivalists who are easily conscripted into the service of white supremacy in the form of stew pigeons, stooges, snitches, agent provocateurs against their own people in the maintenance and the continued establishment of the white supremacy racist system, so long as that system provides those people with periodic deliveries of social economic benefits, right? And what is dangerous about these people who are sort of petty survivalists, right, is that, they sort of act as an early warning system to the white supremacy system in terms of identifying people within our community who will serve as a threat, who could be a threat, a real or perceived threat to the white supremacy system. And what is even more dangerous about these people is that they teach this behavior to their children and to others as a mean of survival.
Okay.
So if you agree with that, right, and we identify such people, what should we do about such people?
Okay. Mr. Fuller?
And the people he's talking about are victims themselves?
They've been made victims through poverty, relative deprivation.
Are you talking about white people or non-white people? Because the only victims of white supremacy are non-white.
Non-white. Yeah, according to your analysis, these are non-white people who are you will classify them as victims, but because they're under the system of white supremacy, they engage in this behavior because they see it as a way of survival, right? And it's a dangerous behavior because they will undermine the community to the benefit of the white supremacy system, and then they teach their children and other people, this is what you need to do in order to survive.
Sure. This is a prison system. All of the people who are classified as non-white are in the prison system of the system of white supremacy. The system of white supremacy is a complete global prison system, and everybody classified as non-white. That's why they're classified as non-white, are inmates of that prison.
Okay.
Now, these prisoners, some of them seek to get advantages. Some of them seek to prey on other prisoners. I mean, that goes with the territory. That's what goes on. Anybody who's been in a prison. I mean, you know, what we call greater confinement in the code. I mean, understand.
The world's greatest radio.
The most important question in all racial matters is why. One should always ask it.
Radio, the way it should be heard.
You've got the power. The world's greatest radio. Talk.
Only confused.
Welcome back to the second hour of the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com. We go where you go. You are in touch with the compensatory concept. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby, and this is Radio the Way It Should Be Heard. Didn't mean to cut off the last call or even Mr. Fuller, but we are mandated by certain rules of radio that every 15 minutes this is what we have to do. The caller was a very good question, but we're only allotted so much time. That's why we ask you, if you're going to make a comment, make it short and then make your question short so that Mr. Fuller can fully address that without being cut off. So that's the way radio is, because if we don't do it, then we're going to have to answer to the FCC, and we don't want to do that. But anyway, you can still call in by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. For those who are listening, we are speaking with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. He is the author of the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. It's a compensatory counter-racist code guide, counter-racist code book. The revised expanded edition, and it is revised and it is expanded, is now available for sale by going to producejustice.com. And if you're not familiar with it, it's simply a textbook, workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, which is white supremacy. Neely Fuller has penned this. And then there is a counter-racist code guide, which specifically addresses words and how they should be used in a compensatory fashion so that you may deal with whatever you have to deal with. Yes, it's like the last caller. In reading the book, Mr. Fuller addresses each and every issue, or at least I've found, that you could come up with, and even those that you have not thought of as a question yet. And remember, he said that all problems are solved through questions and answers. And this is why it is important that you have the book and the word guide so that you can refer to it in your quest for justice. 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. Phone lines are open now, so you can get right in. This question, another question from Houston, says, Mr. Fuller, I remember you once saying a couple of years back on this show that the white supremacists could end racism overnight if they wanted to. With that being said, if the white supremacists ordered all military personnel and local race soldiers to, quote, slaughter, end of quote, all people who specifically have color in their skin, should we die peacefully, meaning by not reacting in violence? Because the days of complying is already over based on, quote, video evidence, end of quote, where we saw people comply and get murdered.
Sure. Each individual, it depends on what the circumstances are. Like in any prison, what is the specific circumstance on that particular moment, on a particular moment, in a particular day? If you're being beaten, to death on the side of a road or something like that, you should do whatever you can, maybe, to defend yourself, put your hands up or anything like that. But you have to also imagine that you are in. It's just not the isolated incident. This is not isolated. You got to think about the consequences of every move that you make. You're already in a prison. You're already in a prison under the system of white supremacy. So you may have to take the beating until you can get in a better position, where you don't have to take the beating. That's the point that I was making about the movie that I kept talking about. The person had to put up with anybody in a prison has to put up with stuff because you're in the prison. Unless you can make a decision on the first day you're there. I'm going for the wall. You can make that decision. Most prisoners don't do that, including those that consider themselves to be super brave and don't take no stuff off of nobody. They have proven that they take stuff off of somebody by being in the prison, because you can die anytime. All right? So in answer to that question, you can just simply say, I'm not putting up with this system one more minute. Now, what does that mean? It means you are going to die in that minute. But most people opt to stay here a long time, as long as they can, until they can get in a better position to do better than what they are doing at the time that they're complaining about.
Yes, sir.
Including myself. Very few people want to die the minute that they become aware that they are in prison. Very few people want to die the minute they find out that they are in a system that's designed to hurt them. When you say that you are a black person and you are in a system of racism, very few people make the decision the minute that somebody tells them that. Oh, well, that means that I might as well just go out right now. I'm not going to stay around, 10, 20, 30 years and then die. When I can die right now. And you can die by killing yourself. Because just by breathing in the system of white supremacy, you're contributing to the system of racism. Or you can go out and start fighting the racists any way that you see fit to do, and it's your choice.
Okay.
That's a personal, individual choice, like it is with any prisoner who is a prisoner of war. You can choose to kill and to die, or try to kill and to die at any moment. You always have that option.
All righty, let's go to the phone lines. Line number, what is it? Number one? Okay, now number one, what is your question according to the compensatory code?
Hey, good morning, guys. My name is Jeree. How you doing? I have a question here for Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, since the system of white supremacy is all based on hatred, self-preservation, and just overall defeat, as you routinely say, it would seem logically to me that the only way to defeat or overcome this system is through physical warfare. Would I be right in that logical assessment?
Mr. Fuller?
Well, it depends on definitions. What is physical warfare? See what I mean? And I've been over this. The code covers this. This is all in the book. There's a section called war where a individual person takes direct action. That's the only section in there because that's what, if you just want to segment war from politics and from education. When you're being educated, you are a warrior. If you're being educated in a way that gets you out of the condition that you're in. See, it depends on what kind of label you are going to put on whatever it is you're doing. But there is such a thing as the war label, in which you can say you take direct action. That's specified in the code book, but I'd never have time, and nor would I ever attempt to explain what that means over.
Can I chime in?
Yes,
can I
sir.
chime in? Well, historically, at least in this country, and really worldwide, all revolutions have for the most part, been about war, physical war, bloodshed. We as a black people, I am black. I'm the ancestors. My ancestors were slaves, and in this country, we've always had to struggle and fight. So I think what you're saying as far as what type of warfare, whether it be mental or educational, it just seems logically to me that the only way to overcome it would be through fighting and sacrificing our lives in order to overcome this wicked system. I really don't see any other way around, this mighty, mighty system of white supremacy other than through physical bloodshed. That just seems like a logical, result of all of this. I mean,
okay, Mr. Fuller.
I don't understand the question.
Well, he just said that historically, war or bloodshed has been the method that people have used to overcome their situation, being mistreated and being abused and so forth. But that was his saying on that. Am I right to say that, caller? Oh,
that is correct.
Okay, yeah. And he just wanted to know your response to that, what you said.
My response is there is a way to go about doing everything. So that being a fact, when, where, under what circumstances, and by whom. Everything, all problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. When, where, by whom, how many, under what conditions. So you got about maybe 30 or 40 questions. Anytime that subject comes up, maybe 200 or 300 questions will have to be asked and answered. And even the question of who's going to do the asking and who's going to do the answering. When it comes to questions of who dies and who doesn't, who is killed and who is not killed, and under what circumstance, we're talking about a lot of things here. So you don't just see the compensatory way is everything is in specifics. And that's why I have made suggestions in my code book. That's what I mean.
Yes.
But I just outline what is suggested by me. I don't go outside of that.
Yes, sir.
See, because other people will have different suggestions about when, where, under what conditions is there going to be some kind of bloodshed.
Right.
I make it very specific about when that bloodshed should happen.
Okay.
In the code book, particularly in the war section.
Yes.
Of the book that I have written.
Oh, okay.
Because everybody's got their opinion about how that should be done.
I enjoy it.
Okay. Thank you, caller. Thank you. That's right. Wow. I like that. TalkTimeAtRadio.com is a 24/7, no-charge, worldwide broadcasting facility that have hosts delivering on various topics such as news, lifestyle, sports, health, wellness, religion, and politics. Sound like Mr. Fuller's Code, doesn't it? Now, here's one that I'd like to share with you. I shared it in the first hour, but I'll share it again. And it's simply called Crossing Cultures. Now, host Julia Lynn Walker has great conversation regarding the diaspora. If you are interested in knowing your history, Julia Lynn talks about that and more with great guests. Now, you can tune in to Crossing Cultures every Wednesday, broadcast here on TalkTameAtRadio.com. Hey, Galen, that comes in after this show, doesn't it? After this show, if you've never heard that program, you need to do that. I think it goes along with this, learning a little history about where you came from and what's going on. Anyway, exclusively on TalkTameAtRadio.com. That's radio the way it should be heard. I am Mr. Bobby, the co-host on the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Our main topic today is Mr. Fuller addressed the Colin Kaepernick incident, where he was accused of disrespecting veterans by not standing up and paying attention to the national anthem. And he refused to do that and sit down because he wanted to bring attention to injustice that black folk are going through. But the racists have twisted it and put the emphasis that it was on military personnel, veterans, and it wasn't the case. As the words came out of Mr. Kaepernick's mouth, that wasn't the case. But anyway, they tried to focus that on that to cause the uproar, and even to this day, 6 days after it, they're still talking about trying to convince you that this is what he was doing. Anyway, you can chime in on that and also any other topic that you would like to by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at numeral7 MrBobby@gmail.com, and it will go into question rotation today. Anyway, let's go to the phone lines. What line are we on? Line number 2. What is your question for Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. according to the compensatory code?
Hi.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
My question is, if every white person, and this kind of is like at the foundation of the Kaepernick situation, but if every white person is a potential white supremacist, and under the system of white supremacy, white with non-white sexual relationships are inappropriate due to the child-adult analogy, would the same logic apply to non-whites befriending white on a non-sexual basis due to the interest of the two parties not being one and the same or being congruent?
Mr. Fuller?
The two parties not being one and the same, what does that mean?
Well, the interest, it's kind of like a plaintiff-defendant relationship when it comes to white, non-white, as far as what the white supremacists want, what their best interests for the white supremacists aren't necessarily in the line with what black people or non-white best interests are. So even on the basic foundation of a friendship, at any time it could flip to where this white person now wants to be a white supremacist. So should just compensatorily, logically speaking, black people not befriend white people?
Mr. Fuller?
I don't understand the question, but I'll try to say what the code says about sexual intercourse between white and non-white.
Not sexual, just a platonic friendship.
Platonic
Should that be avoided
friendship?
by black people with white people because of the potential for the relationship to turn adversarial, where the white person could turn supremacist at any moment?
You mean a white person who is a friend of a non-white person?
Exactly. Should non-whites avoid friendships with white people due to the potential of the white person turning supremacist at any moment of them knowing the most intimate secrets or vulnerabilities of that non-white person?
Well, according to the code, any white person who is able to be a racist probably is one. That's just an automatic assumption, period. No exceptions. Any person classified as white who is able to be a white supremacist should be considered a racist suspect. That's according to counter-racist science. It's logical. It's not personal, it's business, because it's a condition of the entire world. So, I don't know what is meant exactly, and I put it in the word guide. This word friendship. What is a friend in the system of white supremacy? That would be one of the logical questions. The question that you ask is a logical question, but then you got to ask a lot of other questions and get definitions. So that's why definitions of words are very important. What is a friend in the system of white supremacy? What are the criteria? What is the criteria for being a friend? What is the criteria for platonic? What do you mean by platonic? You know, platonic, I guess, meaning you're not having sexual intercourse. I guess that's what it could mean. But the person is a friend. Now, when is a friend a friend? And what are the qualifications for friendship? The code says that no one is a proven friend in the system of white supremacy, since it's difficult to understand what a friend is. But it's in the word guide that when someone uses the word friend, you have to go into very specifics, because friend can mean one thing to one person and another thing to another person. It's a highly flexible word. So anytime you're talking to anyone and a person says, well, look, I want to be your friend, now it's question and answer time. I mean, like maybe 200 or 300 questions, because your qualification for friendship might be, oh, you want to be my friend? Well, I'm going to tell you, I got 1,000 things on a list, 1,000, that you will have to meet in order to qualify for the title of friendship with me. And then you ask a question, are you ready? Because your requirement might be 1,000 things. And that's what you would call a friend. Another person might say, oh, if you do these 3 things for me, you're automatically my friend. See, so the word friend has to be always nailed down. People use this term all the time. Oh, I didn't know my friend would do that. My friend's always messing over me. Well, now you got a great big question here. Remember I said about questions and answers. Your friends messing over you? How is that possible? That's impossible, I guess. But then, what's your definition of friend? But people say that all the time.
Yes, sir.
My friend's always stabbing me in the back. They always do that to me. They've been doing that as long as they've been my friends. Well, now, that triggers a lot of questions in someone who hears you say that. But what is your definition for a friend?
Okay. Thank you for your call, caller. Thank you. Before we get to the next call, I have this Gmail. It says, good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller. My niece is going to a so-called Ivy League school, whatever that means. My sister is giving her the impression these schools are full of kids with money that come from good families, whatever that means. And they all want to be there to get an education. But I believe these are places where you can find the most extreme suspected white supremacists. What does the code say about so-called Ivy League schools?
Oh, I don't know about Ivy League schools, because I don't even know what an Ivy League school is, but I perceive it to be what people call a school where you pay a whole lot of money to go, and you meet a whole lot of people who are supposed to be very, 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 very knowledgeable, I guess, about problem solving, I guess, because I've never heard the definition of what qualifies a school to be called Ivy League as different from a school that's in some other kind of league that's not Ivy. I mean, I've never heard specifically what all that really means. Maybe I should look it up. Now that it's been mentioned to me, I'll have to look it up, because I don't know what they're talking about, except it's supposed to be a place where you learn more than you ordinarily would learn in other places. But then it comes down to learn more about what? In order to do what?
Not specifically speaking for him, but in my lifetime, I would say this. I've heard that Eastern schools, particular, maybe one on the West Coast, Stanford, but Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth, Columbia, those schools, even Northwestern, as a matter of fact, those schools have been pointed out as being the bastions for higher education, or leads to good job. MIT. There's been a lot of emphasis on those schools as being, if you want a quote unquote, whatever a good education is. And if you go there, this is where you're going to land. A lot of the presidents and corporate people come out of there. But I think what this brother is saying, that in addition to that, if they are in fact that way, they also seem to be bastions of places where white supremacy really reigns high, and it is called a, quote, good school. I believe that that's what he was addressing.
Oh, all right. Within that context, what we call, and black people themselves use this expression, black schools,
Okay.
white schools.
Okay.
See, we're talking about school. We're just talking about learning. So, really, if you look at it within that context, and according to the counter-racist code, anytime you are around suspected white supremacists, you're around people who you can perceive as knowing more or having access to knowing more than you do. Because that's what white supremacy is.
Okay.
One thing in the second area of activity, education. Education is what? It's the process of learning all the things that you need to know.
Yes, sir.
In order to do what? In order to do the things that need doing. That's what education is. Learning all the things that you need to know in order to do the things that need doing and or should be doing. That's the correct education. So, in a system of white supremacy, anytime victims are around suspected white supremacists, you are around people who are knowledgeable about power and having power, and also people who have access to power, because in the system of white supremacy, people who are classified as white have greater access to power of all kinds.
Yes, sir.
Than people who are classified as non-white. That's why, logically speaking, you have a thing called white supremacy. It's because knowledge is power. You cannot be ignorant and you're around other people who are not ignorant about the things that should be known. You are going to be most likely dependent on the people who know more than you do, because that's all ignorance and knowledge is. The person that knows more than you do about what needs to be known is the person that you're most likely going to be dependent on, logically speaking.
Logically speaking.
Even if it's just two people on the planet, the person that knows the most and understands the most is the person that the other person is going to have to depend on for knowledge and understanding. The white supremacists see to it that white people in the system of white supremacy, for the most part, have access to greater knowledge, and therefore they will have greater power than their victims.
Okay. All righty. Let's go to the phone lines. Line number what? Okay, number 3. Okay, line number 3. Hey, listen, we're probably going to have to hit a break, so hang on as we do that. What is your question according to the compensatory code logic?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller. I want to thank you, Mr. Bobby, for getting that question on air.
Okay.
Really quick, I want to ask, my name is Malachi, by the way. Real quick, I want to ask Mr. Fuller. This person has been brought to your attention before. His name is Tariq Nasheed. He's the person who made the film Hidden Colors, the documentaries. I noticed that he's been doing a lot of interviews, Dr. Drew and a series of other shows. When he does these interviews, he's using phrases like race soldiers. And knowing that the code teaches that people should stand by their work, shouldn't he refer people to your book or to you? Because he gives the impression that he is creating these words and these terms. And I think he's using it for notoriety.
Okay.
But he doesn't credit you. I know you don't ask for credit, but I think that according to stand by your work, he should do that.
Okay, hang on, because we have to go to a break. Hang on, and I'll have Mr. Fuller address that question. Hang on, caller. TalkTimeAtRadio.com. All righty. TalkTimeAtRadio.com. We go where you go, and you can download the TalkTimeAtRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio. It should be heard. This is Mr. Bobby, the co-host of the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and we've been speaking on topic about Kaepernick's remarks that have been twisted by the white supremacists. But anyway, we can speak to that or any other topic that you'd like to bring up. A caller was on the line, and we had to go to a break. Caller, could you just condense it so Mr. Fuller can answer that question again or for the first time?
Okay. According to the code, which says people should stand by their work, there is a person who is doing a host of interviews, a brother by the name of Tariq Nasheed. He uses terms like race soldiers. I'm wondering, according to the code, shouldn't he refer people to Mr. Fuller and Mr. Fuller's books as opposed to giving the impression that he coined the phrase race soldiers?
Oh, okay. Mr. Fuller?
Well, that's a request on my part. That's a compensatory request in order to not, the word credit is being used, not give me credit, but to minimize confusion about sources of information. There's a scientific reason for this, and that is if everybody gives their sources of what they're saying, if they're repeating something that somebody else said that's not generally known, then it's kind of in line with compensatory counter-racist logic to say what the source is in order to achieve what? Not give a person credit or to discredit another person, but for clarity and to minimize what? Confusion.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because the white supremacists are very busy looking at anything that any non-white person does that may be of danger to the system of white supremacy. And they immediately start figuring out a way where they can put in their words in what is being said and cause what? Confusion.
Like they did with Mr. Kaepernick.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, he'll be saying one thing, and the white supremacists, I mean, there are a lot of black people who have their remarks about it, but then there are white supremacists, they will join that crowd, and they will go on the internet and all like that, or go on speaking circuits and whatnot, and they will put in what they have to say. And sometimes they will pretend even to be a black person, speaking.
Yes.
In behalf of black people. And it's a white person who is a white supremacist who will go on the internet pretending to be a black person and start saying certain things and blend it in with what some other black person is saying. And then the result is confusion, because then they'll start steering the conversation away from what it was originally intended to do.
Yes.
And the black person spends all his or her time saying, I didn't really say that. I'm trying to explain what I'm saying and why I did what I did or why I said what I said. But these other people, I don't know, they coming from here and from there and from yonder and whatnot. And a lot of them not identifying themselves. And, they're saying that, that I said this and I said that and what I meant was this and what I meant was that. And now it's all over the place. And so the general listeners all over the world, because the internet is worldwide, they just throw up both hands and say, I don't know what to think.
Yes. Thank you.
Which is exactly where the white supremacists want them.
Right. Thank you for
everybody in a state of mind where they don't know what to think.
One of those interviews was actually on the Dr. Drew show.
Okay. Thank you for your call, caller, very much. Thank you. Yeah, this is you're exactly right, Mr. Fuller, and this is what has happened with Mr. Kaepernick. I mean, it has really been blown out of proportion, and he has stated what he said in response to what he was accused of saying. And they still blowing it up. Well, he shouldn't have said this, and he shouldn't have said this. Even veterans have come to his defense that he has a right to say, and they understand what he was saying, especially, about the mistreatment of black people and injustices that are still being done. But the suspected racists have made it that he was against the military and veterans and so forth, and he did not say that. I mean, it's wild. And I think that once we read your book, and we can get a better understanding, the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept, a compensatory counter-racist code. And I remember that in reading this book, I'm able now to identify certain habits. You call them the usual suspects. You can see the pattern and then begin to do what you have to do. As a matter of fact, speaking about the book, you can get this book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. It's a compensatory counter-racist code by Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Revised Expanded Edition is now available. And it's simply a, textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, which is white supremacy. It can't get any more plainer than that. You can get your copy of this by going to producejustice.com. And what will come on the screen, Mr. Fuller, when they do that?
When you go to the site,
yes, sir,
producejustice.com, what will come up on the screen is a brief description of the basic textbook, Compensatory Counter-Racist Code. That's the prominent title on the cover, and that's a revised, expanded edition of the 1984 edition. It has a computer design on it. And the additional book there, for an additional cost, is a compensatory counter-racist codified word guide. And we're talking about the use of words right now.
Yes.
Now, a lot of people get both volumes because actually the additional book is just an addition to the basic book. But the basic book is what most people get. But if you want the word guide, it's something similar to a dictionary, but it's not exactly a dictionary. It's a word guide about what words to use, what words not to use, and more than anything, when other people use certain words, ask for definitions, very specific definitions, so you will know exactly what they're talking about. And that's what this counter-racist word guide is supposed to help a person to do.
Yes. I like that because, excuse me, something is in my throat. You mentioned today about intelligent resistance. I had never heard that term before, but you explained it. But for those who are just listening to the program, can you explain that again, intelligent resistance?
It means in every situation you want to do the best do or say. See, because everything that a person is about doing. You're either doing something or you're saying something, or a combination of both. So that means for black people, for victims of racism, for non-white people, anybody who is under the system of white supremacy, you always want to do or should want to do and or say the best possible thing, the most intelligent thing, the thing that will work in every situation that you're in. That's what counter-racist codification is really all about.
Yes, sir.
It's supposed to be, and I try to write a guide that will lead a person into doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that it will work, but the only way you'll know whether something will work is to try it. But I'm saying these are just my suggestions.
Yes, sir. So even though, and one of the callers or one of the people who wrote in today mentioned about people getting killed or slaughtered or murdered on TV, and you mentioned don't fuss, don't fight, don't flee. And even though they gave up their life, it would still be considered, if they didn't fuss or fight or flee, intelligent resistant, even though they were facing death.
And you might face death anyway. In other words, a person just walks up and kills you.
Well, yeah, that's true.
I mean, without any words being spoken or anything.
Yes.
That happens.
That happens.
See what I mean? But you do the best you can. It's three things you know are not going to work. Why? From experience and from observation. You see it happening on TV. If you fuss, if you fight, or if you flee,
yes, sir,
most likely it's not going to end pretty. If you do any one of those three things.
You already know that.
You already know these things. Why keep doing something that doesn't work?
Yes.
I keep using just that. Does it work or doesn't it? It either works or it doesn't. If it works for you, then do it. But if history has shown that it usually doesn't work, why fuss? Why fight? Why flee? Why jump out of the car, starting with that first F? Jump out of the car, waving your arm, talking about what your rights are, using I say is in the Northwestern Hemisphere is practically the Negro national anthem. MF this, MF that, MF, 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 and you're telling a person with a gun and a badge all about this MF proposition that you have, and it's not working. See, that's the bottom line. After you do all of that, what's going to happen?
So could you say,
do you think that the person is going to say, oh, you're giving me your point of view. Oh, okay, this is what this is all about, your point of view. I got a badge and a gun, and also another badge, white skin, and you, with your black skin, in a system of racism, are telling me your point of view out here on this highway. Okay, I got your point of view. Now, what about when I start giving you my point of view, which is this 9mm.
9mm.
And everything that goes with it, and not only that, an entire society that will back me up when what do you have except your homies who are already locked up?
So would you say that pacification is a form of intelligent, or could be construed as a form of intelligent resistance?
Well, I'll put it this way. You say pacification?
Yes, because you don't want to get killed, and so you examine the facts that this person has this 9mm badge and the badge of their white skin, and that they could take your life at any time, particularly if you fuss, fight, or flee.
I'll put it this way. I often give this illustration.
Okay.
And people have seen it on television or heard about it or something like that. Some people may or may not have.
Okay.
You're a paratrooper. You drop behind enemy lines. You know you're behind enemy lines. It's midnight. You're trying to get out of your parachute. And you have a gun. You know, because paratroopers, I mean, they're soldiers. They have a gun. But then, all of a sudden, 12 flashlights are on you. And you're surrounded by enemy soldiers behind enemy lines, and you haven't even gotten out of your parachute yet. Now, they tell you, in your own language maybe, if you're lucky, put up your hands. The intelligent thing to do is put up your hands. Now, all this business about escaping and all like that, you're thinking about at that moment, or you should be, if you are trained, reasonably intelligent. Put up your hands and go along with this program until you get in a position of better advantage. That's what I mean by intelligence.
Yes, sir.
The intelligent thing to do is to go along with this program, even if it's for the next 15 or 20 minutes. Because to try to resist now, all tangled in your parachute lines and trying to get you to your weapon and all this, is what?
A death sentence.
Not going to work.
Yeah.
Why do something that you know is not going to work? So let's fast forward that to another scenario. Not fussing, not fighting, not fleeing. Okay, so you got arrested maybe. All right, at least you're breathing. Now, you might go in to a so-called court and the camera was rolling and you took a lick on the jaw. Now, that just might work in that court, depending on who's on the jury, in your favor. On the other hand, it may not work. You just got your jaw broken, and then because the jury said, hey, that didn't count, depends on who's on the jury and all like that. But at least you didn't die. But you got to remember, you're in a system that's stacked against you anyway, the system of white supremacy, not the American system. You're not in that. Get that out of your head, according to the code. Look in the code book and see what America is. It's not even produced yet. It doesn't exist yet. You are in one system, one government. And what is the name of that government if you have black skin on this, and you're on this planet in the year 2016? You are subject to only one government in 2016. And what is the name of that government? The system of white supremacy. You are not subject to any other government. There is none.
All righty. TalkTameAtRadio.com. We go where you go, and you can download the TalkTameAtRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio the way it should be heard. This is Mr. Bobby, the co-host of The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and we've been on topic this morning about the incident concerning Colin Kaepernick. But if you have a subject that you would like to call in about off topic, you can by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com, and I will try to read it at least next week. Let's go to the emails or Gmails. From Javar, he says, Mr. Fuller, how long have we before the European just outright slaughter the rest of us, 40 million or so, and I don't know where he got that number, without even trying to cover it up or pretending that we have rights? I don't think we have more than a few years before they just round us up like a holo hoax style and just do to us what the so-called Jews claimed happened to them but didn't, and I can prove that too. If there is a disagreement about it, I think 2020 or 2022 is the end game for the so-called Black American who are really Afro-Native. As a follow-up, shouldn't we just start doing any and everything to preserve ourselves so that our gene pools are not annihilated just like the European does? This is about survival at all costs. We cannot wait for the train coming straight at us to hit us. We never think the threat is immediate, but people are already starting to mysteriously disappear all over the country. Mr. Fuller?
I've said since even before I wrote my book, when I just had a few notes, that any time the white supremacists, because once you are supreme, meaning what does supreme mean? It means you can dictate to another person every move that they make or don't make. You put the person in a prison-type situation, which is what racism is, a prison-type situation. And so you envision like a prison. You are completely subject to someone who is opposed to you on the basis of color. They are just going to work against you because you are the incorrect color in their minds, his or her mind. So, and that person is supreme over you. I'm not talking about supreme in mind or something like that, or supreme in some type of mythical, spiritual sense or something. But I'm saying the person can tell you what to do, and you can't tell them what to do and make them do it. But they can tell you what to do and make you do it, and do this all the time. All right? You know, and get away with it, and there's nobody to go to. Nobody to go to when you are yelling and screaming about your condition. There's nobody you can turn to. Now, some people say, well, you turn to your religion and all like that. But if the person keeps doing it, it just means that whatever your religion is hasn't intervened so far, simply because the person keeps doing it. Your religion may kick in at some time, whatever it is. And so, therefore, the code does not say anything about me or anyone else. The recommendation is people should practice his or her religion, whatever it is. But there's no religion that's been proven to be stronger than the religion of white supremacists so far when it comes to non-white people.
All righty. With that being said, let's go to line number 1. What is your question for Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. according to the compensatory code?
Good morning. I was calling because I'm reading the book, and Mr. Fuller mentions the acutely ghetto impaired, the AGI, and I was wondering, should we spend time, while we're in this system, trying to dismantle it at the different levels? should we take time to try to save everyone that's maybe suffering, I guess, from AGI, or should we just, like you said, to be your own leader? Should we just be worried about ourselves, our families, or should we try to help those, to get on code?
All righty. Mr. Fuller, AGI?
If I understand the question.
Acutely ghetto impaired or something like that?
Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Was she finishing
yes,
the question?
Yes, sir.
If I understand the question, she was saying, should we help people other than ourselves? You do the correct thing. See, codification is about always doing the correct thing on a minute-by-minute basis each and every day. And what is the correct thing? Anything that is of constructive value. Find the most constructive thing that you can do on any given moment of any given day. Non-constructive should be something that you should stay away from. Try to do the most constructive thing, the thing that will work best. And what is constructive? Something that will help to use truth to produce justice and correctness, meaning you don't mistreat anyone, and you try to help the person that needs the most constructive help. In other words, try to produce justice. That's why the title of my website is Produce Justice. That should be your goal. And what is justice? Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. Just do that each and every day. That's what codification is about. Not some broad sweeping thing, looking over the horizon and trying to find nirvana by thinking about going this place and going that place and all like that. Just wherever you happen to be, do the most constructive thing in every situation that you're in. If you speak to someone, speak in a constructive manner. Try to think of the best possible thing that you can possibly say in that situation that will never be said better by anybody else throughout infinity. And if you are going to do something, whatever you do, think about it before you do it. And try to do the most constructive thing that you can possibly do in that very moment, that no one will ever, even in the next 2 trillion years, in that same circumstance, will ever be able to do it better than what you just did. That's what codification is all about. You try to do and say everything that is super over the top perfect every time you make a move. And that'll take all of us, everybody on the planet really, right where they need to be, right where they should have been at the beginning of time. That's what codification is all about. It's not complicated. It's, you deliberate thinking about what's going on around the corner and down the road and all like that. You can think about it, but look at what's right in front of you and say, now, I'm fixing to make a move. And this move that I'm going to make, is it going to be better than any move that anybody will ever make in all the time that's going to ever exist in the future, or all the time that has existed in the past? This thing that I'm going to say to this person, will it ever be said better? This thing that I'm going to do around these people, is it ever going to be done better? Or ever has been done better? And the answer should be yes, it's going to be better.
All righty. Thank you for your call. And thank you, Mr. Fuller. TalkTameRadio.com, the world's greatest radio, and radio the way it should be heard. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.